Welcome back to the podcast. This is the Success Blueprint, and we're here with my partner, Morgan Peterson, and Kimberly Wilkerson. And welcome to our podcast.
Thank
We're
you.
excited to hear from you. Done so many things, from Miss Wyoming to being a speech pathologist, which is pretty amazing. And now a new chapter in your life is coming up. So we're excited to hear kind of what's going on in your world. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So first off, of course, Success Blueprint, this podcast is really to try to pull those snippets out from people because we're learning as well. That's why one of the reasons why we wanted to do it is because we wanted to learn from people. And there's so many great people in our community that have so much to give, right? And so thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. And from your standpoint, you've seen a lot of different businesses, a lot of different people. From your perspective and your prism, what have you, I guess, with your background, what has gotten you to where you're at now?
So I'm going to start with this.
Okay.
I'm going to start with what I see and certainly what I've experienced, and that is a lot of failure.
Okay.
Right? Isn't that interesting?
Sure.
But it is what it is. Like I've realized that being successful at anything is failing along the way. I've heard that from so many incredibly successful entrepreneurs and business people and athletes. And again, my observations and certainly my experience. In fact, I remember thinking one time, I'm like, wow, if there was a trophy for failing, I would take it, right? And I'm not trying to be pessimistic or negative. I mean, sometimes it can lead to that, and I try to be careful about that. But truly, in order to be successful at anything, you really have to keep going, and you're going to stumble, and you're going to fall, and you're going to what we call fail.
Of course.
I remember this visual from decades ago. Actually, I don't know why it was this bunny rabbit, but it showed this bunny rabbit on his face, and the quote was, "Always fail forward." Right? And so I think about that. I'm like, that's right. If you're going to fail, make sure that you are failing forward, that you continue to go, that you don't give up, and that you try again. You have to assess things. You have to look at things, but you're going to fail. So embrace it, be ready for it, recognize that it's part of the journey, and recognize too that you really are not going to become the best version of yourself. You're not going to make the best product or have the best service if there's not a lot of failure. That is part of that.
Do you have a failure or two that was maybe your favorite failure or failures that you've learned from, or that that you've pulled maybe some of the most lessons out of, or maybe that was a pivotal moment, defining moment in your life?
Sure. One is communication, and which is interesting because I'm a speech language pathologist, so you'd think that I'd be, top notch at communication. And this is a small one, but this shows a little bit about business. So one of the first products that we launched with Token Clothing Company was a pajama line. And the interesting thing about this line is that it fuses beautiful fashion with powerful language. And I understand the neuroscience and the positive psychology behind language, being a speech pathologist. And so I thought, I want a company and I want a platform where we merge fashion with language. So with this particular line, we put these powerful affirmations on the inside of the pajamas, not the outside, based upon some research, which I can get to.
Interesting.
But most cut and sew factories and mills are not used to that, right? If there's going to be a graphic, anything is going to be on the outside, the exterior of a garment, not on the inside. So our mill was in California, and they did a great job. However, they ended up doing a quality check on the exterior portion of the fabric that was milled, which is understandable, but not on the interior, even though the tops are reversible, and that's something that I had conveyed. I thought I was communicating clearly, and I was. However, I have learned that with whether it's products or services, or really with whatever you're trying to do, there has to be greater communication, because of course financially there were things that happened with that, because there were these part of the composition of that fabric was a small percentage of spandex. And I learned, I didn't know this, that there can be spandex tears in any type of fabric that has spandex.
Really?
So our mill, they sent the reams, and they're actually just down the road in Blackfoot, Idaho, is a cut and sew factory. Most people who have lived here their whole lives do not know that.
No,
it's
I didn't know that.
fantastic. Yes. And so as we got the reams from the mill to the cut and sew factory in Blackfoot, they called, they said, hey, we've started the production with the pattern cutting, and we're noticing all of these splits in the fabric that they look like tears. And I'm like, okay. So I went down there. got on the phone with a mill, realized, hey, what is going on? What are these and why? So that was kind of an expensive lesson to learn with all of the fabric that we could not use. Also at that cut and sew factory in Blackfoot, again, I loved working with them. They were fantastic. And I was a newbie fashion entrepreneur, right? I had never done this. There was lingo that I had to learn because I didn't grow up with a fashion background or degree. And so they were fantastic in working with me. But one of the things, again, just because they weren't used to it, is they ended up cutting, I think, 25 sets of pajamas upside down.
Oh,
and
okay.
so, right? So there were just different mistakes.
Sure.
And I looked at that, I'm like, you know what? Yes, is it partially their fault? Yes, but is it my fault too? Is that a failure on my part? Absolutely. And because I recognized, okay, it does not matter how much I think I'm communicating well. I need to be getting feedback, and I need to go over things in different ways and make sure things are absolutely at a place where both have clear understanding of what that project is and how we're going to move forward with it. The other piece that I learned through that failure, both with the mill and the factory, of course, when things like that happen and when there's lots of money involved, it's really easy to get frustrated and really easy to be like, how could you do that? And like we've gone over this. But I quickly learned, and I'm grateful for this nudge, that I needed to make sure that I approached them, helping them to understand how advantageous they were to my business and how grateful I was, and not go in there upset or, hey, we've got to fix this now. But again, work in a way that ended up benefiting them and making sure that they knew how much I appreciated what they did. And so that was a really interesting experience for me. And I'm grateful for it because I've thought about those experiences and how I move forward in anything and how I interact with other people. Because we're humans, it's easy when there's a lot on the line to get really frustrated and sometimes to react in ways that we regret later or that are not as kind. And so that experience taught me to take that breath, to take that moment, and to look at the bigger perspective of these are real people and with real emotions and real feelings, and how I interact as an owner of a business, as a leader of any sorts, is incredibly important. And I need to be thinking long term about what's happening in this interaction versus what's right in the moment.
So in that instance, so many people would just blow up, right? They would get up, they'd get frustrated, they'd blame. Very few people have that ownership mindset of, this went wrong. Okay, what role did I play in it? And what can I change so it doesn't happen again? And very few people can look at it from that perspective. Have you always been like that? Or is that something that you've just learned over time? Or
that's a good question.
I don't know if I would have done that. I probably would have gone in there guns a-blazing like, hey, you guys did this wrong. This is your fault.
Yeah. So first of all, you can quote unquote blow up in your mind, right? In your room, in the privacy of whatever you need to. I know that there was frustration, and it's not that I automatically let that frustration go. I think there's ways to handle that better, habits and processes that we develop. And I know this sounds simple, but honestly, the processes of journaling, right, each day, which I try to do, and prayer and meditation and nutrition, like all of those pieces, because our bodies and our minds are one. And so doing all of those things, I think, help us. Even if it's in the periphery, it's still helping us. But then also, for me, it's really important to take that pause and take that moment. And oftentimes during those pauses and moments, I offer prayer. I'm a woman of faith, and so I have full expectation that God is a business partner with me and directing me in everything I do. And so in these moments, I look to him first. And I know that the nudges that I received, even in those instances, came from divine guidance, because I'm more of a fighter than a lover, right?
Okay.
When I look at my personality. So I guess to answer your question, have I always been like this? No, but I do try to care about other people.
Of course.
I will also share this. I have a dad who is an entrepreneur, and I have watched him and how he interacts with others. And I know him at home. I know him behind the scenes, but I also know him in front of people. And it's really been interesting for him to be an example to me of how we interact with people. He's always said to me since I was a kid, you can say anything. It's the way that you say it. And I think it's true. You can get your point across. You can be very clear and very blunt, but it's the way that you say it, right? Whether that is our tone of voice, the type of nonverbal language that we're giving, our intentions. So that is something that has stuck with me. And oftentimes I think about how he interacts with people in high tense situations.
Yeah.
And I try to take a piece of that from him.
That's awesome. That made me think of kind of the old cliche of people don't care what you say until they know that you care.
Yes.
And kind of the same thing, right? You can be bold in that if you need to be, if they know that you truly care about them.
That's right.
And you're coming at it from that contribution versus just, I want from you.
Right. And so that you have to lead with that, right? You have to
Yeah.
lead with that care and that compassion and concern before anything else.
Yeah. That's awesome. So started down the road of speech pathologist.
Yeah.
Speech and language pathologist.
Yeah.
And so I guess what's the difference there, first of all, just so we're aware?
Sure. So the technical title is speech language pathologist.
Okay.
Right. In the schools, you might hear speech therapist.
Yep.
The abbreviation is SLP or speech
Okay.
path.
Right.
There's lots
Okay.
of different pieces of lingo that play into that. But
So you went down that road through school, and then you wanted to start a clothing line. How does that?
Right. How does that
How
fit?
did, I know.
'Cause
You
there's
said
nothing
that
in
there's.
common.
I know
Or
you said
so
you
it
have
seems.
those empowering words and phrases and that in your clothing, but how did that translate, or how did that come
Sure.
about?
So I wanted to have a fashion company before I went to graduate school for speech pathology. And I didn't
Really?
know because I grew up kind of as a tomboy. I didn't wear pink until I was an adult. I mean, probably as a baby and kid I did, right? But it was really interesting. Like if you had told me when I was 16, one day you're going to want a fashion company, I would have laughed. I would have been like,
Yeah.
that is never happening, right? I loved science, I loved theater, but fashion, no.
No. So growing up in Wyoming, right? Is
Yes,
that- okay.
I had the privilege of growing up. I love
What
Wyoming.
part of Wyoming?
I grew up in Gillette. A lot of family
Okay.
is from the Lovell, Cody, Powell Basin
Okay.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So Wyoming, I mean, Idaho's fantastic. My mom grew up here, which is why I've been here, but I love Wyoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So as I said, I was actually at the University of Wyoming for graduate school. And as I sat in class, I was thinking about fashion. And I remember at one point thinking, Kimberly, if you want a fashion company, why are you paying all of this money and spending all of this time for graduate school? And I was even like drawing designs in the margins of my notes sometimes.
Really? Wow.
And I'm not even a great artist, so I had to use words to explain what I was trying to draw. But I knew that I wanted both, and I still knew that speech pathology was the right route for me. So
Okay.
along several years of becoming a speech pathologist and practicing that clinical acumen, I took classes on the side. So sometimes I did some private lessons so I could draw better because I had all of these ideas in my head, but getting it out on paper with my hands, it just wasn't my talent. So I took a few drawing lessons. Then I also studied light and texture and color and read different books about the masters of the fashion field and did a few different things here and there.
Yeah.
And back, I think it was 2015, 2016, I did launch a t-shirt company with a friend of mine who was a graphic designer. And again, it was just a simple graphic t-shirt company that focused on Americana, military.
That was the My Freedom, My Family?
Yes,
Is
My
that-
Freedom, My Family t-shirts.
Okay, perfect.
And for me, that was a really good introduction to understanding business as well as online retail. And we only had that company for, I think, 2 or 3 years, but still we had some interesting successes with that, which was good. And again, I think it just gave me this underlying background.
Yeah.
And so continuing forward, not knowing when I would launch this true fashion company, still being a speech pathologist, we get to 2020, of course, and none of us knew what 2020 would be until it came.
Of course.
And I had this opportunity around 2020, 2021 to actually go down to the Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, as a speech pathologist. And I scuba dive and snorkel, and I love the tropics. I love the sunshine. And I thought, this
Surprised
is
you
a
came
dream come
back.
true, right? Well, I didn't take the opportunity because at that time, too, I was thinking, I just kind of felt this nudge again, time to start this company. And so as I looked at what could happen with that, I knew that the decision, if I went to the U.S. Virgin Islands, would be a good one, but the trajectory of my life would also be different than if I did not. And I thought, okay, I can go to the Virgin Islands anytime, I guess, as a speech therapist if I really want to. I'm going to start this company. And so in June of 2021, we launched the LLC, and then we were doing all of the prototyping, et cetera. With COVID-2, costs for production shot through the roof. And so there was also that hesitation with, do I really move forward with this right now? Because between like the first prototyping and production costs had gone up between mill and cut and sew about 60%.
Whoa,
Yeah,
that's a big
right.
jump.
And I mean, that was across the board. It wasn't just with me, but it was across the board. And so again, I go back to my dad. I remember where I can even remember this. We were actually down in Mexico. I was with he and my mom, and it's interesting how there are certain visual things that keep with you. But we were walking on this path, and I just remember him talking about entrepreneurship, and I was telling him, the decisions that I was trying to make. And he stopped. He goes, sometimes, Kimberly, you just have to look off that cliff. And he looked over, he goes, and jump. And that was kind of a defining moment. I'm like, he's right. And so I'm like, I'm not going to the Virgin Islands. I'm moving forward with this regardless of what's happening, and we're going to leap.
That's awesome.
That is so cool. That's amazing. Well, cool. So basically that was kind of a dream from the very beginning, even though you went down a little bit different path for a while, but, and it sounds like you never gave up on it because you kept doing things along the way to get you in a position where you could do it.
Yeah. And I did. I didn't know that I would be merging language with fashion. Right?
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't know that until I started prototyping, actually. But I looked back. So one day I remember being in my office and I was looking at all of these drawings and just different notes that I had. And I realized, wow, there's a lot of words around all of this. And because, part of it was to explain what I was trying to draw. But part of it too, like when I doodled, I would doodle with words, positive words.
Yeah.
And I recognized I have all of this expertise in understanding language and the origins of language and the power of words. And I thought, I don't see that in the fashion industry. And I knew even at the beginning, meaning back when I was in graduate school and in my 20s, that I wanted things to be different. I saw the fashion industry, and this is true historically, it can be very competitive. It can be even demeaning at times. And I wanted to kind of change it on its head, especially for women, and say, how do we actually use clothing to edify our minds and to be able to be a positive force for good? And so I thought, okay, well, there's lots of graphic tees, and we even have a graphic tee line. But again, I knew some of the research about language and affirmations, and I thought, what if we merged everything together? And then we get to this research that I think is fascinating with water. So there is a scientist, there's multiple scientists that have done research, but Masaru Emoto, who has since passed away, did a lot of research that is well known on words and water. And he would source water from the same spot. He would put droplets in petri dishes. He would then label, awesome. He would label those petri dishes with either positive or negative words. So for example, love, gratitude, peace versus hate, destroy, kill, devil, things like that. Yes. And then he would freeze them so he could study them under microscope. And when you look at his publishings, it's fascinating to see. You would see these beautiful crystals for the positive words that had been formed. And then with the negative words, you would see really distorted crystals. And I remember thinking, okay, our body's about 60% water, give or take, right?
Yep.
How we speak to ourselves is important. And we know more and more of that with neuroscience and some of the studies that we've done. So I thought, I want those affirmations for this first pajama line. And by the way, it was COVID. So it was like the golden era of pajamas, whether good or bad. Like, I don't know how we want to view that, but nonetheless, there was like this projection for pajamas to keep going up. I'm like, okay. And I thought, well, this is like, this is an intimate, when you're wearing your pajamas, usually you're more reflective. You're not doing as much physically in way of activity. And so I thought, okay, I want to start with pajamas, and we're going to put the words on the interior side because I want those words touching your skin.
I love that.
Yeah. Wow. Now, the tops on those pajamas are reversible, and they're specifically designed so when a woman is wearing that pajama top and she looks in the mirror, she can read every other line of those affirmations. But if I'm wearing that pajama top and my friend walks into the room, they can also read every other line of those pajamas. So it was designed so not only can you edify your mindset, but anyone who is around you can be uplifted as well.
That's amazing. Incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So the power of words is definitely beyond just mindset. Mm-hmm. It's actually chemical and physical.
That's right.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
So so with affirmations and that, so when we're doing those, we're actually, it's not just something we're telling ourselves so that we can be better. Those things can actually physically change us, essentially.
So let's start with a 2-letter word, right? And I'll share this in presentations at time, but if I were to flip a page and show you the word no, we would see an increase in heart rate and an increase in blood pressure. And there would be other physiological markers if you were under functional MRI that we would see with that simple word. No is a needful word at times, right? Well, we have to say it at times, but it's also considered a negative word, and it incites within us an automatic physiological response. And so, which is okay because it could be that we're preparing for the fight, flight, or freeze response too. But nonetheless, it's a negative word. If I am being inundated with negative language all the time, whether I'm saying it, whether I'm listening to it, right? That's another piece that is not that we just have to be participating in a conversation that's negative. Those movies that we watch, the radio shows that we listen to, the podcast, this one, of course, is positive, the podcast that we listen to, they will impact what is happening at the physiological level in your brain, which then, of course, impacts your body. And so if you are being inundated with negative information, negative words all of the time, and you have those responses in your body of the heart rate and blood pressure, and that stays in an elevated state, then of course that is going to start to impact long-term chronically what is happening in your body. Now here on the other side, in looking at positive language and positive words, what we see is actually a calming of the systems in your brain. So it's not that we see a huge marker of something else, but we see this calming of the physiological responses. And then even there is research to show some of responses with different brain parts, if you will, right? The anatomy, like, hey, we see more symmetry with certain brain parts over long term with positive language. And so when we see that, we know that our brains can function to their optimum. And so that is why one of the reasons why we want that positive language, because we want to be able to be at, our peak state.
Absolutely.
So
that's awesome.
I heard somebody talk about his view is that one of the reasons why these life-changing and kind of civilization-changing ideas, we don't have as many of those anymore. And his thought is because we're never calm. We're always constantly listening to something and always doing something, and our mind's never at a state of calm. When those ideas and those bigger ideas can come to your mind.
I love that.
And I thought that was pretty incredible. And so saying that with positive language can help to calm our minds, can help us be more creative.
Absolutely. Yeah, it creates that environment for stillness and for peace, right?
Yeah.
Which then those creative juices flow. I look back at my life and I'm like, when did some of the biggest, brightest ideas come? Yeah. I'm like, when I was exercising, like seriously, like there were times I'm like, I just should get on the treadmill more because then maybe more of those ideas will come. Like it's hilarious to me, but you think about what's flowing too from a physiological state when you're exercising and the endorphins that are releasing, and I do like to do a lot of things outside, so then you have the nature piece of it, and I love that actually.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I think a lot of times too, you can see that in as you're exercising, because of that, hearing that a few years ago, I do, not every day, I do sometimes work out without my AirPods, right? Mm-hmm. I take those out and I do it without it so I can think. So thoughts can come to my mind, because I find that if I've got music or books or whatever in my head all the time, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about the next thing or the idea that'll help me or impact me.
Well, and I've seen things that, on that note, like when you can sit still, especially if you suffer from a lot of anxieties or a lot of things that bother you, right? We don't have time to breathe, go down, and let those things exit, because you're kind of keeping them trapped in there with all of these stimulant thoughts or things that we're always putting into our head. And so if you can just, what I've learned and studied is if you can just sit quiet, the things that your anxieties, you'll process them and work them out in your head so that they can actually kind of exit. I know it sounds like crazy, but it's so many times we're keeping these thoughts and things in there because we're not, maybe it's boredom or whatever it may be. We're not allowing ourselves to think about them, to, really truly let them exit. We're not giving us that cooling period or whatever it may be.
Yeah. So what things, obviously in practicality, right? So obviously we can be more mindful and more purposeful on what we're taking in. Mm-hmm. What other ways can we, knowing this, what other ways can we adapt this to our lives?
Yeah, sure. So I teach a lot about becoming aware of your language. So this is some really interesting research that came out of a university in Canada a few years ago. And it's kind of sad, at least to me. I'm like, what? So they did a study on what they called thought worms. And a thought worm perhaps is an entire phrase. So it's not just a single word. For example, the sun is shining today. That would be a thought worm because it's those single words are related, right? Essentially a thought or a phrase. And so they did their research, and some of the results showed that on average, we have about 6,200 thought worms per day that are going through our mind. And again, this is in the conscious state. So we're not talking about subconsciousness here. We're talking about conscience. Yep. And with those thought worms, again, here's the kind of sad piece, is that 80 to 85% of those thought worms are negative.
Oh.
Right?
Wow.
And isn't that interesting? And then also with that, we repeat close to 90% of the same thoughts day after day after day. And so
90%.
Yes,
wow.
Right? Which is interesting because you think, well, wait a minute, I do this work and I have this conversation, but a lot of that inner talk, a lot of what's going on is being repeated. And so if you have a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of negative, inner language, and you're not even thinking about it or being aware of it, right? It's in that mind, but you're not being aware of it. That is being repeated again and again and again. And so most of us, I would say, myself included, and I really have to work at this, we allow thoughts to drift in and out without actually assessing those thoughts. And sometimes that's really hard because we have a thought come in, but we have this task we have to attend to, we have this person to talk to.
Of course.
But it's important to be still, to take that time to meditate, to actually understand what is drifting in and out of our conscience so we can become aware of the language. And I will say this as a woman, because I've talked with lots of women, I've observed it myself with others, but I think this is true with men too, there is a propensity for us to be very self-critical. And it's one thing to be able to look at ourselves and assess things that we can change and do so in a positive way. But when we're saying, man, I'm just not good enough, I'll never get this, I hate how I look, I'm ugly, I'm fat, the list goes on and on. I'm a horrible sister, I'm a horrible dad, right? Those are negative, really negative thoughts. And again, if we're repeating those consistently, we're creating those neural pathways in our brain for those thoughts to continue. And again, how is that impacting how we're presenting, how we're acting, right? We're saying those words are, again, that research with Emoto, they're being absorbed into our skin, into our beings. There are many philosophers, certainly over the ages, scripture that talks to us about being aware of our thoughts and our words, right? There is greater power than most of us understand and realize. So we talk about those negative pieces, but the opposite is true. So those positive pieces, and I have done this is supported by research, and I've done this practice at different times myself, but I have actually taken 2 or 3 days where I have a small journal that I know is going to be thrown away. And I will, when I can, I will actually write down every thought that is in first person, I am, or I'm, or something that's related to me, not, hey, this food is delicious. Okay, great. But again, related to me, I will write those thoughts down, and then I will go through them. I will keep the positive ones. Hopefully there's a few in there, but I will cross out the negative ones, especially as I see patterns, and I will write a new thought that is opposite. So simple example, if the thought is, I'm so ugly, then I'm going to cross that out, and I'm going to cross it out wherever I see it in that 2 or 3 day, right? I want 100 thoughts. That's always my goal. Let's do 100. I'll cross it out, and I will put, I am beautiful. And I might even expand that thought, right, into a paragraph. So I am beautiful. I take care of myself. I know I am loved. I am worthy. All of those thoughts that surround the simple statement, I am beautiful. And then what I've done with that, I still do this, but I started this years ago, where I will actually put the new positive thoughts, right? First of all, so I cross out, I put the new thoughts, type them into a spreadsheet. I throw away that journal because I don't want those negative thoughts anymore. And it doesn't have to be something that, is shared with everyone either. But I take those new thoughts, I will write them down, I will speak into an app, I'll put pretty music behind it, and then I will listen to those things on a daily basis.
Oh,
right? Because
awesome.
I'm priming myself, usually in the morning I do this, I'm priming myself to have this positive thinking. Because I recognize, even though I understand this stuff, and I do better than a lot, I still have negative thoughts come. I still, the failure we talked about at the beginning, sometimes that is really, really hard. And so I still struggle with always being positive to myself. And so by having these practices, it allows me to put in place these strategies that are going to help me when I need them the most. And also, I always think about it, you know, we take showers every day, we brush our teeth every day, we do these things for our body. What are we doing for our mind? And there's multiple practices that we can implement that help keep our minds clean and healthy. And that is also how I approach it.
So that's become a lifestyle for you. That's become something that you do purposefully every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, intentionally. Yeah, and some days I feel that it's stronger and other days it's not. I'm always like, I always am saying an I am statement of some sort that is positive. Even on my mirror, I have things. Sometimes I will, as James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits, I'll habit stack. I'm like, okay, while I'm making my bed, I am worthy, I am divine, I am strong, right? Like I'll say those things again and again. And sometimes I even try to imagine myself what that looks like, whatever visual image comes to me, because we know visualization certainly plays a piece in our language, and that there's a lot of research to show when we can visualize and create that scene in our mind, there is going to be stronger outcomes of where we want to go.
Yeah, we were just in a training not too long ago where they said, okay, what's the picture of the roadblock? What's the roadblock that's stopping you from advancing in whatever it is, right? Whether it's your, working out every day, or whether it's reading every day, or whatever that obstacle is in business or personal life. And what's that obstacle? And he kind of had us visualize it into a shape, whatever shape we wanted, color, texture. Kind of went through it really slowly, and basically just, okay, grab that out of your brain and throw it away. And it was pretty interesting. It was interesting how that
detail
little,
that he went into.
Yeah, just that exercise. When you go into that detail and you have it in your mind, and then just to throw it away, how powerful that is.
It was like you feel it. You like, what does it feel like? What color is it? What is it? And and you pull it, and it is kind of the release of it. Like you felt better. You felt lighter. You felt, and it's pretty incredible of what your mind can do. And so when I did that exercise, I remember thinking like, I wonder how much bad stuff I'm putting in there. Like this felt really good, and I don't do this stuff enough. But what am I naturally, like what you're saying, what are these I ams that I'm adding into my brain that are just, just don't need to be there?
Well, if 80% of those thought worms are negative, we're never going to get to 100% positive. I mean, but if we can get to 50-50, I think we're probably winning.
Right. And again, it's based upon intentionality, right?
Yeah.
Like and again, if we looked at their subjects who did this, I don't know all of the background of those subjects, but if you're going to be intentional with your language, I think you can even get a much higher percentage, right? Because you are retraining through that awareness and through the reframing, or I like to call it refashioning because it's more fun, right? The refashioning of language, that when we change those things, we can change them for good as long as we continue to practice them. And so you can get higher and higher to that 100%. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be inundated even in your environment, perhaps with negative language, but how you respond to that negative language, what you put in its place quickly when you hear it, to change that and make sure that you remember who you are and those statements that you're saying to yourself. I think those percentages can become really high, and we can show research. We're changing this.
We're changing it.
Yeah. I love that.
That's amazing. So do you, do you do courses on this? Do you teach people this all the time? Or is this just something you found that's helped you in your life? Or how has this been? I mean, this obviously you've gone deep into this, into this process and studying it.
Yeah. At this point, I don't teach courses. I've done a lot of podcasts. I've given a lot of presentations to various groups.
Yes.
And I talk about this because it relates to Token Clothing Company, certainly, and perpetuates why I'm doing this business, the importance of having those affirmations on your body in different ways, and being able to see those things in the mirror, being able to say those affirmations and believe them and feel the power of those things and how that can impact you all day. So it's kind of this culmination of, again, what I understand as a speech pathologist, my studies certainly with the neural piece of that and understanding the positive psychology. Perhaps at one point I'll be like, I'm going to do more with this. I like sharing the information because I think it's helpful to people. And again, we need to become aware of what's happening up here.
Yeah. So is that including your love for fashion, the two reasons why you have Token Clothing? Is for those two reasons, or is there more behind that, or more that drives you, beyond that?
Sure. I want to be able to edify women. Again, perhaps one day we'll have a men's line. I'm not sure. There'll have to be a different designer than me. But at this point, I'm like, this is about women and girls. And so I want to edify women, because when we can do that, we edify the world, right? I understand the influence of positive women who are seeking to do good in this world. And I want to give them tools and strategies and a product that actually will help them transform their mindset, so they can then teach and transform the mindsets of those that they love and those that they interact with and serve. So I would say that is my ultimate desire. Sure. Like, again, I'm taking things that I have expertise in, that I have passion about, but the ultimate desire for me is to be able to transform women through the platform of fashion, which has really, I don't think, ever been done as I look at the history and see what's happening. To use fashion in a highly positive way that ends up changing their lives and the lives around them.
And a ripple effect to help push those and more.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That's awesome that you've taken a passion, both of yours, from both aspects of your life, essentially, and made one thing out, and intertwine those. It's pretty amazing. So tell me about the Pay It Forward program within Token Clothing.
Yeah, I always knew that I wanted a philanthropic arm with this. We had one with the t-shirt company years ago, and I knew that I wanted one with this. And so as I was thinking about what this company is, I thought, you know what? Who would need these words the most? Who would need these products? And I'm like, well, every woman that I know needs this.
Course.
But then beyond that, I started reaching out to some nonprofit organizations that serve women who have been trafficked. And I came across the nonprofit organization Refuge for Women, which actually is our nation's largest long-term rehabilitation center for women who have been sex trafficked. And they have different homes in different cities and states.
Okay.
And as
they're nationwide.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
They are nationwide. And as I talked with them, I realized this is who I want to partner with if they're willing. So this initiative allows a customer to come onto that website, and the names, there's initials, right? There's not full names. And we already know a piece of what these women have gone through. So they're not sharing their stories with us. That's not something that we need to know, because we know enough. But what they are sharing with us are their dreams and their hopes. And I think that's remarkable that they still have that despite some of the horrors that they've gone through. And so a customer has the opportunity to gift them a pair of pajamas with these incredible affirmations on them. But also during the checkout process, you have the opportunity to write a personal note to this woman. And then Token Clothing Company fulfills the pajamas as well as the note that will go to these women. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. That's awesome. So how'd you get that idea? Was that just...
I don't know.
Where did that come from? That's pretty
it was
awesome.
A few months after we launched. I remember I'm like, I've got to do this. Again, it comes back to language. I think I knew that I wanted to lift and edify those particular women. Yep. But then also that note, I recognized the power of that connection. Because I had other ideas. I'm like, how do we get women to connect with this particular situation? Because of the confidentiality issues, I couldn't, provide full names and start women connecting that way. But I'm like, well, we can still give them a note of encouragement, inspiration that will benefit them. And so we're doing it that way.
That's awesome.
So Token's been around for a little bit.
Yeah,
it's still a startup, but
it's still a startup. We'll be 3 years this fall when we launched online.
And so how many pajamas have you been able to give away, or do you have those numbers? Or
I don't actually. In way of to that particular initiative, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
I not as many as I want to.
Right.
Right.
That's never the case.
Right. I know.
Yeah.
But we have. Yeah, I don't have those numbers actually.
Okay.
It's rotating who's at that at the different rehabilitation centers, and so we're trying to make sure that we give those women before they leave. I mean, they're there more long term than
right.
an overnight house or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but fortunately, the places keep connection with those women. So even if they've left, we can still get them a pair of pajamas, which is good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. That's cool. So, obviously, being the success blueprint, how does language into ourselves, what have you seen the most successful people do? I mean, how have you seen language change their perspective or their mindset? Yeah.
So again, in my observations, when I go back to the beginning with that failure, right? Sometimes you have to go through that moment that feels really horrible of like, how is this going to be better? This is a failure, et cetera. But then it's a matter, I think, of that self-talk. What are you going to tell yourself, or what are you going to pull from someone else that's positive to keep going? I mean, we're always speaking to ourselves and speaking to others. Like, we don't realize how much we communicate. And so being able to kind of pull up those bootstraps and just keep going and keep being positive. And something that I have learned about this as well is the hard stuff's going to happen no matter what. It is really all about our response. I mean, yes, we can sometimes mitigate mistakes and mitigate some of the hard stuff, but we're human. It's going to happen regardless. And so it is always about that response to it, because I think that plays a huge piece in what's going to happen next, not just the steps we take, but what we're going to receive in that. And again, even, I know you mentioned this earlier, like I'm getting ready to move out of state. And so moving is never fun. Can we just say that, right? No. It's just never this fun.
Hey, we're in real estate. Be careful how you say that.
Right? The technical aspect of moving is never what I would call a fun time. But I've even thought about that with some of the, bumps along the way of getting prepared and different things that have happened. I've thought, all right, Kimberly, like, yes, this is super frustrating, and you can admit that and you can experience that emotion. But how are you going to respond to it? And what is your outlook going to be? How are you going to step up with a little more faith and a little bit more hope and a little bit, again, a broader sense of what this move is about, and being able to move forward with optimism? We live in this world, and again, this is a sad piece for me. We live in this world that is constantly, where we are constantly being inundated with negativity and criticism and hopelessness, right? We really, I think that's kind of the default that we're constantly given, whether it's through media, whether it's through friends and family, a wide variety. And so we have to be really intentional about recognizing, yes, these things happen, right? Life is hard.
For sure.
However, how are we going to approach it, and how are we going to look with optimism and hope, regardless of what's happening? And when you look at, some of the most successful people that we would call successful through ages, they, I think it was Thomas Edison, where his lab burned down, right? And I just remember reading this piece where he essentially told his kids, go get your mom. She'll never see a fire like this, right? As his lab is burning down. And so that's just one minor example. But again, it's how we look at what's coming to us and those difficulties that we all face, and oftentimes on a daily basis, and how we're going to look beyond that, filled with hope and optimism, and recognizing that there is an energy and a power around us and in us, that if we will have faith in that hope and look forward to good things, that they will transpire despite the hard stuff that's happening right now.
I love that.
A question, so I'm thinking of how, and it's, I guess, it's $1 million question, how to turn a pessimist into an optimist. Mm-hmm. But do you feel like, and as I listen to you speak, do you feel like when you use the I ams and you're adding, if I understand you correctly, you're adding just more positive? Like, you can't, really pull the negative out of somebody, but you're saying, like, with the I ams, you're adding more positives, and then you're going through and then subtracting the negatives.
Right. You are
changing those.
Yeah. And so, like, with that,
changing them.
So I'm going to be honest. I guarantee you, if you ask my family, is Kimberly an optimist or a pessimist? At least years ago, they would have been like, they would say pessimist, right? Because I always just said, I'm a realist. Like, this is how it is. Like, I was just kind of blunt. This is how it is. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
But realists, like for those who are optimists, realists are pessimists.
Right.
And I get that. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I have experience with this, I guarantee you. And it is a matter of, again, becoming aware. And and a person has to decide to do that, because no one wants you to tell them, do you realize that you say this and this? Maybe, again, you can say anything is how you say it. So maybe you can say that in a way that is delightful to them.
Sure.
But typically it is with each of us that we have to make that decision to really take a look at what's happening in our lives and what's happening up here in our brain, and decide, I need to be more aware. And then as you become aware, wow, I'm saying this a lot, or I'm doing this, and this is perpetuated by this thought, this action, right? The thoughts typically become before the actions. So this is what's happening. How can I go back? What are those thoughts that precipitate the action, or that I'm in a bad mood? What have I been thinking about? How do I change that, right? So it's almost as if you are replacing that negative thought or statement. You're recognizing what it is, and especially if you see patterns, repetitions, then you recognize, okay, I'm having an issue with this. How can I create something that's positive? So when that comes, I can immediately say something positive behind it. Or as in the case with me, and I know many others, you start your day, you're listening to those positive statements, priming that brain to start to make those new grooves that are completely positive. I mean, again, there's other practices too with journaling, right? Writing, oftentimes I'll do this. I will write how I feel it. And sometimes that probably seems really negative, but then I'm like, all right, now what are the blessings in this? Or now what is the positive of this? And so I always make sure that with that, if I have to just get out those feelings on a piece of paper, that then I also write the opposite of that and essentially the good things, whatever those good things might be. Right. Gratitude is another piece, right? That is, there's lots of research on gratitude, but gratitude is all about language and what we're saying. I am grateful for. There is energy behind that. So I hope that answered your question. Is that it starts with that person? Yeah,
that's awesome. I think for me, listening to this, I need to be way more aware of the thoughts that are going through my head every day. Sometimes I'm not. I just kind of go through my day and in the day, and that's what it is, right? But just being more aware of what I'm telling myself without even knowing it.
Right. And, I think it's interesting, too, is that even if we do have a lot of positive thoughts going on, well, how can we, this is what positive psychology, the field of positive psychology is all about. It's about how do you start kind of at this equilibrium and how do you become better? So it's not just always about negative to positive,
right?
But it's all like, okay, here's positive, but now how can I actually develop even more as a human being,
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And grow more. And so I'm like, what language can I use to increase the good that I'm already doing, but have more of an impact to those around me because I'm developing as a person?
When you say those things, I'm so guilty of this that I could serve lifetimes. But we joke, right? And roast. And it's like at home, I've got some kids that are, they've learned it from somewhere. I'm going to say it's their mom, but we do that a lot. And when you say that, like, because sometimes they'll say something to somebody else, and I'm like, okay, that's beyond that. That's a little mean. Like, we don't say that. And so it made me, these thought worms, like, how many of these are we breeding? How many of these are we actually, putting in there artificially that, we have them enough on our own.
Right.
I don't need your help or your help to add them to mine. We need more somebody to help exterminate them.
Are we adding those to other people's?
And so that's what kind of made me think of as me as a parent. Like when you're saying, I don't realize I'm doing it. I may not realize that I'm doing it either. But then how much are we like really inflicting on somebody on some of these, these thought worms and what they can actually do.
Right.
So,
and I would say, so I think that's a great consideration for all of us, right? I can be snarky at times and I'm like, all right, like again, like, it's just like, tame it back. And how do I get, maybe get rid of that and more careful, but also with that, then again, it becomes, okay, so let's say that, hey, we're doing better. We're not doing that anymore. So what can we do with people around us where we are praising, where we are encouraging, where we are intentionally saying things to them that are lifting and edifying their minds, right? We like just generally kind words, right? How can we be intentional with that and kind of get out of our comfort zones? Maybe if we're not, someone who would go up to a stranger and say, I love your dress, or, hey, that's a cool watch, or, hey, your child is so funny. He just did this, whatever it might be that we're observing. But I think it's interesting that as we live in this world where we are constantly interacting with other people, we can create a space where we are intentional about our language towards them and just recognize, okay, how can we bring a little bit more light? How can we bring a little bit more edification, a little bit more encouragement, a little bit more love to the people that we're interacting with?
And in doing that, it almost always reciprocates.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. I love that. Well, awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
This is fantastic. Definitely opened my mind to a lot of different thoughts and different things that I probably need to start doing. I need to be more intentional with in my life.
We all do. And again, coming from someone who has talked about this ad nauseum almost, it is something, again, it's a practice that we have to continue at each day. And we can do just, that 1%, that little bit better each day.
Yeah.
And I will plug in the Token Clothing Company, and to definitely, listeners or, snippets of this that come out, that I hope people look at that and, shop on there and share some more.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's it. What a great rally around people, and what a great cause. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in.
You bet.